last class, we had started off with the introduction of international business, right? We learned about the meaning, right? We learned about the various features of international trade as well. Yes or no? So we just discussed about 8 features because it's large scale operations, integration of economies, it is dominated by developed countries and MNCs, benefits to participating countries, keen competition, special role of science and technology, international restrictions, and sensitive nature. These were the points that we dealt with in the last class. So today we'll be moving on towards the various theories of international trade that is given by various economic authors. Okay, that is mercantilism theory, absolute advantage, comparative advantage, product life cycle theory, factor production theory, national competitive advantage theory, or it is called as Porter's diamond model. So today we'll be studying the first two theories, that is mercantilism and absolute advantage theory. To start with, mercantilism trade. The first things first, let's first every theory, since there are 8 theories in this first chapter, first let's understand the authors of this trade, who gave the trade or who gave the trade theory. So mercantilism theory was the oldest of all theories that is given on the list, and it was given by Mr. Thomas Moon. Okay, now he was the person who has started this theory of mercantilism, and it was given in the year 1630. Okay, now I want you to remember for every theory the author who has given it, and also in the year which it was given, or the year it which was proposed. Now, this theory is the oldest of all the international trade theories, because we just listed out 8 different theories, right? Out of all those, mercantilism was the first theory that was proposed. Now, what is this Thomas, or what is the theory state? The theory stated that the economic strength of any country depends upon the amount of gold holdings. Now, I want you to imagine the picture of the economy or the world or the countries back in the year of 16th century. You got my point? Back then, I want you to think about the how times were there, or how trade would happen, or what would the medium of exchange of goods and services be, on what procedure, etc. Right? So then, uh, the author stated that any country, if I have to say country A is economically strong, or country X is economically strong, it directly depends upon the amount of gold holdings. Now we all know every country for today, right, has a central bank, and the central bank is responsible for all the gold holdings, or the amount of gold reserve. Yes or no? Likewise, it was the same in the back then in the 16th century, where countries' gold holdings was supposed to be meant the economic strength. Okay, so how do you gain? So how does gold enter into a country? Okay, now greater the holdings, yes, more economically independent a country is, right? Now, as a statement says, greater holdings, that means more amount of gold a country has, that means it is more economically uh, strong compared to its neighboring countries. Now, when does a country become rich, or when does it have more gold holdings? If its exports are more than its imports. Always remember, a country's international business or trade has 2 types. Either you need to export your goods to other countries, or you need to import goods from other countries to your respective country. Okay, now all of you know the basic idea what is export and what is import. Now On that note, if a country has to be more rich or more having gold, it has to have more exports, right? It says nation should have trade surplus. Now, every nation on this world is actually aiming for trade surplus. What is trade surplus? That is to make sure your exports are always at least twice than your import. Okay, now let's say on an for per year your imports are, let's say, rupees 1 lakh, and this is just an imaginary figure. Imports totals up to rupees 1 lakh. Your export comes up to 80,000 rupees. Okay, I'm repeating, your imports are rupees 1 lakh and exports are rupees 80,000. Now, what position is this called? Your imports are more than your exports. That means you need to pay more money than that you receive money. Every time you import, you have to pay, correct? How much are you paying in this example? 1 lakh. Every time you export, you receive money. How much are you receiving in this example? 80,000 rupees. That means there is a loss for the country of rupees 20,000. Got my point? But here this trade theory talks about surplus, not deficit. When does a trade become surplus? That means when exports are more than your imports. Is that clear? That means your exports must be, let's say, rupees 5 lakh and your import must be rupees 1 lakh. That means my exports is much greater than my imports. Every time I export, back then the exchange, let's say, would be amount of gold or gold biscuits or gold coins, whatever the gold reserve was in the form of. Correct? So, wealth of nations and that time period was always measured by the stock of metals they possess. Now, that time maybe they even had exchange of gold or even exchange of silver. Okay, that's why they call us stock of metals. Okay, so countries' economic independent, right? Independency depends upon how much stock of metals they would possess. So countries have to do their best to increase their export and restrict imports. So the theory directly aims at try and not depend upon your neighboring countries for goods and services. Instead, whatever is possible or whatever your country is efficient at, try and produce it in a larger scale. That way, you can start exporting more. Okay, so every country actually started working upon reducing their imports and increasing their exports. Now, import, how can you reduce or control? That is by when the country's government increases import taxes, trade or tariffs or octroi charges, etc. These are all the various expenses that you have to incur if you have to, import certain products from your neighboring countries. Let's say the cost of the product is 100 rupees, but the expenses only terms up to rupees 60. So total comes up to around 160 rupees of the product. Yes or no? So what happens is when the government increases this tariffs, octroi charges, or shipping charges, taxes, etc., automatically people or traders will stop importing goods until and unless it is the necessity or the need for the living. Is that clear? Unless it is the most necessity. Now, how can I stop importing unless the goods are necessary? That means if you are dependent upon other countries with respect to food or oil, these are the necessary things for people to continue their life or to meet their basic needs of living. Okay, now if I'm trying and importing cars or other costly machines, is that required for our living? No, that is required for our higher standard of living. So that way we can control the importing of such not required goods, but then just focus on what is the need. So this theory regulates trade and uses tariff and other protective measures to shield the balance of exports over imports. So, hope you have understood the theory of mercantilism. Now, here's just a quick example. Now, as you see on your screen, there are two countries that is displayed here, right? There's our country and there's Sri Lanka, right? And you can see the amount of gold holdings that each of these countries have, right? Now, as you see in the picture, country that is India has more gold holdings than compared to the country Sri Lanka. So that is understood that which country is more economically independent or economically strong? It is India. Okay. So this theory directly states the more gold you have, the more stronger a country is, or the more economically independent a country is. So hope you have understood the first theory, mercantilism theory. Moving on to the second theory, that is theory of absolute advantage. Now, first things first, who has introduced this theory? Adam Smith. I've purposely put the pictures of authors on the screen so that you would remember, right? When you see things, you remember better than when you hear it. So, absolute advantage theory was authored by Adam Smith. I'm sure this author you would have learned even from your PUC times, correct? This author is quite famous for his theories and for his economic inputs, etc. Okay, and this theory was given in the year 1776. As it is, I want you to remember the trade theory name, author, as well as the year it was established. So let's see, what does this theory state? Absolute advantage is the ability of the country to produce a good or a service at a lower cost per unit than other countries. So here the theory or the Adam Smith talks that every country has certain abilities, correct? Certain countries are strong in some resources and certain countries are not. Okay? So Adam Smith states that if one particular country, okay, has absolute advantage, that means it has a good ability in producing a good or a service at a very, very low cost of production, then that country must produce that particular good on a larger scale. So some countries have an advantage of cheap labor and other countries have fertile land, resources, etc. As I told, all the countries in this particular globe or world are having some kind of absolute advantage. Hope you can agree to that. No country in this whole world is self-sufficient, right? Can any country in this world say we have all the resources that we require and we do not have to import anything from the outside? Definitely not, right? Every country has is strong in certain resources and is weak in certain resources. Every country, no matter how economically strong it might sound, it has certain things that it needs to import from other countries. Yes or no? So that is what Adam Smith talks about here. Some countries are strong in labor, right? Now India is a populated country, so we have labor abundancy, right? Whereas other countries are capital intensive. They have more of capital, machine, technology. Okay, so that way some countries have a difference in their resources. So this theory is applied to countries based on their product specialization and ability to produce more for less. Okay, now definitely, now if you can see, just look around the countries and we can see, let's take an example of our own country. What is the strength of our country? What is our country capable of, right? The number one that comes to our mind is our country is an agricultural land. Yes or no? The soil that we have is the most fertile one. And of course, each state in India is good at some or the other thing, right? For example, one country can be good at production of tea or coffee. One state can be good at producing wheat. One state can be good at producing ragi or rice. Yes or no? So individually, this country is dominant of agriculture or farming. Yes or no? Now, if you take an example of another country, let's say UAE, that is United Arab Emirates. That means all the desert countries, I would say in a simpler format. What are they rich at? Is their land fertile? Absolutely not. But what are they strong at? They are strong at petroleum or oil in general. Yes or no? So what does these Arab countries do? They try and export petrol to our country. Do we have oil extraction or petrol extraction in our country? Definitely not. We have to import oil, import petroleum. But then, what can we export? We can export all the food supplies. Okay. Likewise, the Arab countries can export oil and import all the food supplies, because for them, they really cannot do any kind of farming because their sand is absolutely infertile for farming purpose. So this theory applies whichever country is specialized in whichever product, okay, and they have the ability to produce more for less. That means you can produce on a larger quantity with lesser cost of production. So by this process, resources are efficiently utilized and the output for both the commodities will increase. Okay, so two countries will benefit from specialization based on their areas of competitive advantage. So here that we see now, if India is trying to import petroleum or oil, so that way India is abundant in agriculture. What it does not have is oil, so it tries and imports oil, so that way we are balanced. Same way with the Arab countries, right? They are abundant in oil, so they export oil. What do they lack? Food products or food supplies. They try and import food supplies, so that way both the countries have efficiently utilized whatever they are good at. Okay, so both the commodities will be beneficial for both these countries. Now here's just a quick example for you. Okay, now there are two examples over here. The first one is on the normal trade. Okay, where we have two items over here, tables and clocks. Okay, and we also have two countries to compare. So India, and what is the basis of this production is output per worker per year. So one person, that is one laborer, how much can he produce throughout the whole year? In India, one person can produce 80 tables. In Nepal, one worker can produce how many tables? 20 tables. Second item, clocks, right? India can produce with one labor 20 clocks in one particular year. Whereas when you compare to Nepal, one worker can produce 80 clocks in one whole year. So what is the by observing that table, what can you see? Right? That India has absolute advantage in producing tables compared to Nepal, whereas Nepal has absolute advantage in producing clocks compared to India. So now look at the second table. According to absolute advantage trade theory, Adam Smith says, why don't you concentrate? Why doesn't India concentrate on producing tables? Because India is the best efficient in producing tables. So just concentrate on what you are best at. So India produces only tables. So that way I can save the time that I'm actually using for clocks and use the time to produce tables. So what is my output here? 100 tables. On the other side, Nepal. Nepal, so Adam Smith says here that Nepal is absolutely having advantage in producing clocks. okay, and not tables. So give up production of tables and only be specialized in production of clocks. Got it? So that way India has producing the best, using all its efficient resources and producing more of tables, and Nepal, using its best of resources and efficiency, is producing more of clocks. Okay, and then that way you can save time and effort in what you're not good at, and then you can start exporting the same to each other countries. Is that clear? So this is the example of absolute advantage theory. Hope you've understood today both the theories, that is mercantilism theory given by Mr. Thomas Mun in the year 1630, that stated about the gold holdings about a country to make sure a country is economically independent. And then we studied about absolute advantage. It is given by Adam Smith in the year 1776. And this is the example.